what the intention is to have this as part of the annual beekeeping calendar here for Canadian beekeepers. And as you realize, as we progress through today, although we have a Canadian focus on our talks, this is certainly not a singularly Canadian event. It's an international event with people participating from, I think we'll be pleasantly surprised to realize how the breadth of the geography that's covered by our presenters and participants today. The theme of this year's webinar is adaptive management to keep honeybees healthy. And the series is organized through the Canadian Honey Council. So we'd like to certainly thank the Canadian Honey Council for their participation and actual hands-on help in getting this ready. And Rod Scarlett, as the executive director, was heavily involved in setting this up originally last year and helping to make sure that this is a thing now that we are doing for the second year and hopefully into the future. Also like to thank the Canadian Bee Tech transfer teams across the country for helping to organize this, and in partnership with the Canadian Honey Council bringing this event to beekeepers here in Canada. We're also extremely grateful for the sponsorship and collaboration of Véto Pharma. They helped with any funding that was required to run this event, which naturally there is always some financial aspects of these things, but they also are very hands-on in getting the organization and getting everything ready for us to participate today. I'd like to mention specifically again an individual, Matthew Polinsky, because he was part of the team through the Canadian Bee Tech transfer teams that helped to organize this. And I know Matthew is here with us today. He's not hands-on participating today, but he was certainly pivotal in the organization of our event here. So we'd like to thank Matthew for the work that he put into this. Just to introduce myself, my name is Andrew Byers, and I'm representing the Canadian Bee Tech transfer teams today. I'm the lead for the Atlantic team, the Atlantic Tech transfer team for apiculture, one of the 7 regional or provincial tech transfer teams across Canada that work for beekeepers and pulled together to create this event for everyone today. I'm also joined by Martine Bernier, who is with us. And she's from the Quebec Tech Transfer Team. I'll turn it over to Martine for a minute so she can introduce herself as well.
Oui, bonjour à tous. Donc, mon nom, comme Andrew l'a mentionné, mon nom est Martine Bernier. Et donc, je vais m'occuper de la partie traduction francophone pour la série de webinaires aujourd'hui. Donc, comme Andrew l'a mentionné, suite au succès de la série l'année dernière, on a décidé de reproduire l'événement. Donc, c'est la série de webinaires sur la santé des abeilles mellifères au Canada. Il y a une première session aujourd'hui, une autre mercredi prochain à la même heure. Donc, la soirée de webinaire est organisée par le Conseil canadien du miel. Donc, je tiens à remercier Rod Scarlett pour son implication. Également, les équipes de transfert technologique du Canada, en particulier Matthew Polinsky, qui est responsable de l'équipe du Manitoba, qui a participé également là, à l'organisation, qui est ici dans la salle avec nous aujourd'hui. Puis je tiens à remercier également la participation de Véto Pharma pour le financement de ce webinaire et ainsi que son organisation aujourd'hui. Donc, les co-présentateurs aujourd'hui sont Andrew Byers qui va mener la présentation ainsi que moi. Back to you, Andrew.
Okay, thank you, Martin. So the main topic for presentation and discussion today will be around new options for Varroa mite control. This past year, we saw 4 new products being approved for use in Canada and other products being submitted for that application process. So today we have representatives from the manufacturers of those products to give us an introduction and overview of each. After the presentations, we will have an opportunity to discuss, ask questions. Martin and I will moderate a Q&A session. So if people could, and I know as we go through this, people will have questions, but if they could hold those until that session, that would be great. We'll let the presenters get through the material, and then we can have a real good opportunity for everyone to participate and ask questions in that session. So to start today, I'm going to turn over to Rémi Pade, and he's from Véto Pharma, and he's going to talk about two products. The pressure's on Rémi today to talk about two products in the time we've allocated him. He's going to talk about Apivar 2.0 and Amiflex. So I'll let you, Rémi, perhaps just give a very brief introduction yourself. I think people will be interested to know where our presenters are geography-wise today, just to, again, demonstrate the true international presentations they're getting today, and tell us about Apivar 2.0 and Amiflex.
Juste avant
You're
de céder la
muted,
parole,
Rémi.
oui, juste avant de céder la parole à Rémi, donc je tiens à vous mentionner que les questions vont être répondues après les trois présentations. Donc aujourd'hui, c'est des représentants de l'industrie qui vont venir vous présenter là, les produits qui ont été récemment homologués au Canada ou qui sont en voie de l'être. Donc toutes vos questions peuvent être écrites, rédigées dans l'onglet de discussion, donc de chat qui se trouve au bas de votre écran. Et vous pouvez écrire les questions en anglais ou en français. On va faire la traduction à la fin. Donc, Rémi, je te laisse la parole.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you, Martin. So I'm trying to share my screen, so I hope it will work. I think so. Just let me know if it's not working. So Rémi Pade, so I'm working for Véto Pharma since 2017. So I'm the head of Bee Research, Innovation and Technical Department, so for Véto Pharma. So I'm in charge of all projects regarding innovation for honeybee health. And I'm also managing our experimental apiary. So we have around 400 colonies to perform very first trial in order to develop new product. So just today, so I'm based in France, and I have a degree in agriculture sciences. So just for information. So I will speak regarding 3 new products so that we will launch soon in Canada. So Apivar 2.0, Amiflex, and Bactobee quickly. So just keep in mind that all information I will share with you today are based on labels for Canada. So it's just to be careful because sometimes we have difference in the label in other country. And I hope you will enjoy my beautiful French accent. So I will start with Apivar 2.0. So what is Apivar 2.0? So Apivar 2.0, it's a new formulation with an adjustable new hanging system for the application in different type of hive. The treatment period is different compared to the previous product Apivar. It acts faster against Varroa mites at the beginning of the treatment, and another important difference compared to Apivar, there is no withholding period after the treatment, so you can apply your Super directly after removing the strip. So I will try to focus on each topic in the following slide. So what is the difference between Apivar and Apivar 2.0? So we have approximately the same concentration of amitraz, a little bit lower in Apivar 2.0 because of the size of the strip and the excipients. So at the end, Apivar and Apivar 2.0, it's the same quantity of amitraz per strip, so 500 milligram. So there is no difference on this topic. In Apivar 2.0, you have 3 inactive ingredient excipients. So the EVA polymer, so ethylene vinyl acetate, so it's a plastic, I will say. We include a release enhancer to increase amitraz release at the beginning of the treatment, and a moisture scavenger, just to improve the stability of amitraz that is very unstable into the strip. So Apivar 2.0 compared to Apivar, it's a faster release of amitraz from the strip at the beginning of the treatment. Then the product will have a long-term effect until the full duration of the treatment period. At the end, Apivar and Apivar 2.0 are extruded strip. So the amitraz is extruded in the blend of the product. So it's not impregnation. So Apivar 2.0, the strip are 30 centimeter long, so 11.8 inch. They have an adjustable length for different hive type. So, for example, for long throat hive and dadant hive, just to show you some example. For long throat hive, you have a pre-cut folding line that lets you, I will say, place the strip like this for long throat frame. For dadant hive, you have to use the hanging system. So the flexible hooks to secure Apivar 2.0 strip on the top bars. So I will go to give you some example of application. So just to explain, so this is a dadant hive I took for example. This frame is a partition, so we reduce the space for bees because it was not a huge colony. So you have a double strip that you need to separate to have two strips. For long throat hive, you will apply the strip like this by using the folding line, as you can see on this picture. And for dadant or longer frame, I will say, you have to use the hanging system. The treatment duration, so compared to Apivar, so the treatment duration is 6 to 10 weeks. So it gives you an extended protection until 10 weeks of treatment. So the 6 weeks treatment is recommended when there is a little brood in the colony. So for example, early spring or late fall treatment. The 10 weeks treatment is encouraged for best results, and it improves effectiveness and reduce the risk of reinfestation at the end. Just a quick reminder, for maximum efficacy, you have to adjust the position of the strip at mid-treatment and clean them if there is maybe too much wax or propolis on it. It's very important to replace the strip because keep in mind that amitraz is acting by contact. So if one strip is far away from the bee cluster, the amitraz will not be distributed into the colony. So be careful and check at mid-treatment. So the treatment dosage for Apivar 2.0, it's 2 strips per brood box. You have to respect a minimum distance of 2 frames between strips. And again, keep in mind that amitraz works by contact. So use it only in colonies that are actively foraging to ensure efficient distribution in hive. So for example, avoid treating when colonies are still clustering, for example, in winter times. And if you have a small colony, less, I will say, than 5 frames of bees, just use 1 strip. Because keep in mind that Apivar 2.0 has been developed to increase the amitraz release at the beginning of the treatment. So if you have a small colony, up to 5 frames of bees, just use 1 strip. So Apivar 2.0 is acting faster. So we have a faster reduction of the mite population within the first 3 weeks compared with Apivar. So just to give you an example, you have the white line, it's Apivar. In one trial we performed in August 2023 with 20 colonies, and the orange line, it's Apivar 2.0. If you look at 14 days after the treatment application, Apivar 2.0 shows 60% efficacy compared to Apivar between 25-30% efficacy. So the release of amitraz at the beginning of the treatment is very important and will decrease quickly the mite infestation. At the end, you have the same final efficacy compared to Apivar or other amitraz-based product. It's around at least 95% efficacy. So regarding the withholding period, so there is no residue above maximal residue limit in Canada. So that is 100 microgram per kilogram of honey, if used, of course, according to the label. As soon as your treatment is done, you have to remove the strip. Just be careful on this point. You have to remove the strip to avoid any trace of small amount of amitraz that can, at the end, I'm pretty sure you know it, leads to resistance. So the treatment is done, remove the strip, and you can directly apply the Honey Supers. It's one of the difference between Apivar, because Apivar, you had to wait, I think it's 14 or 15 days after the strip removal. So with Apivar 2.0, remove the strip, you can set up the Honey Super. The product was validated by PMERA in Canada with no impact on the development of the bee population, no impact on the number of bee brood cells, and of course, no impact on queens. So just to show you some presentations, so Apivar 2.0 will be available in pack of 4, 12, and 60 strip. The shelf life will be 24 months, and the availability will be from April 2026. Maybe end of April, beginning of May, but around April 2026. So now another product, so we call it Amiflex. But you will ask me what is Amiflex, and I will explain in the following slide. So what makes Amiflex different? So Amiflex, it's a brand new gel formulation. It's the first authorized, safe and controlled amitraz flash treatment. So there is no human contact with amitraz. I will show you just after. It's a quick and easy application with a dosing gun that is provided. It's efficient and temperature independent, knock down arthritic mites during the season, in between honey flows, for example. It will help colony raise healthier bees in the pre-wintering period. So what is Amiflex? So Amiflex, it's a 7 days treatment period. You can, in Canada, apply Amiflex 1 to 2 times maximum per year. And with 1 pack of Amiflex, you can treat 200 brood box because it's 2 times 3 milliliter per application. So it's 200 simple brood box. So you have the starter pack and the refill pack. So the difference is with the starter pack, you have the dosing gun. There is only 3 ingredients into the formulation, a concentration of amitraz at 2%, and the gel is in cartridge delivered with a dosing gun. So as you can see on this picture, so this line of gel is 3 milliliter. So per brood box, you have to apply 2 times 3 milliliters. And it will, you will have 110 milligram of amitraz per brood box. And just the product has to be applied on wooden stick that are also in the packaging. Just to explain why we decide to use wooden stick to place the gel, it's after the 7 days, you have to remove the leftover of product, and it's to avoid any trace of small amount of amitraz on the brood, on the frame that stay on the frame and in the colony. So you can remove the wooden stick. So when can I use Amiflex? So you can use Amiflex before, after, or between honey flow. Just make sure you always treat without honey supers, of course. You can also use Amiflex at the end of the season treatment, right before you slow release treatment. It will give you a quick knockdown effect on the mite population before applying the long action treatment. Amiflex does not replace long-action treatment because you can use it, of course, only 2 times a year in Canada. So it's not designed to replace long-action treatment. It's, I will say, an additional tool for your Varroa control strategy. So how to use Amiflex? I already explained a little bit, but just to be clear, so you have to apply 2 doses of 3 milliliter per brood chamber. So each pool of the trigger delivers the standard dose of 3 milliliter. And you have to use it only in colonies that are actively foraging. So just to show you, for example, in dadant hive or single brood box, 2 times 3 milliliters, and in double brood box, so 2 times 3 milliliter in the bottom box and 2 times 3 milliliters in the top box. So this is one application, this is one application. You can use Amiflex on a different way. So if you have, I will say, a mite infestation level normal or not so high, you can apply Amiflex during 7 days. You remove any remaining product and you can now set up your own supers. You have no withholding period with this product also. If you have a high mite infestation, so between honey flows or sometimes in the year, you can use Amiflex up to 2 times with a 7 days break in between. So you apply the treatment, 7 days later you remove any remaining product from the first application, you wait 7 days, and you can do the second application. And 7 days later you remove any remaining product. Be careful, always remove the product leftover after the 7 days. It's again a question of to avoid, I will say, resistance development. Just to show you how Amiflex is working. So again, Amiflex is based on Amitraz. Amitraz is only effective on phoretic mites. So this result presents you the efficacy of Amiflex in broodless colonies with only one Amiflex application for 7 days. So you have group A in dadant hive and group B in double Langstroth hives. So as you can see, you apply the treatment day 0, 1 day after, so 24 hours after application, you achieve for dadant hive 94% efficacy, 93 for double Langstroth hives. And after 7 days, it's close to 199% efficacy. So Amiflex is very knocking out your mites very quickly. I will say you will not use Amiflex in broodless conditions, so we perform also trial in, I will say, normal colony, so with presence of brood. So group, it's in double Langstroth hives. So group A, it's just 1 application, and group B, 2 application with the 7 days break in between. So group B, first application, you achieve 65% efficacy, and after the second application, so 21 days later, you achieve 83% efficacy. With just 1 application, you achieve 56% efficacy. So again, even with the brood presence, Amiflex is effective. Of course, you cannot compare Amiflex to a long-action treatment covering, I will say, at least 10 weeks, but it will help to reduce the mite infestation during the season. So it's very important because the mite infestation level, if you are not acting during the season, will grow and grow and grow. And at the end, you will apply a long-action treatment that will have issues to remove all this mite. So by using Amiflex, and to think about the use of Amiflex following your strategy, of course, you will be able to decrease and disturb, I will say, the mite infestation growth. So again, there is no residue above maximal residue limit in Canada, so 100 microgram per kilogram in honey, if used according to the label. Remember, 2 applications maximum per year. You can add on supers immediately after removal of the, it's not the strip, but removal of the product. You have no impact on the development of the bee population, on the number of bee brood cells, and no impact on queens. So as I explained, you have two package options, the starter pack and the refill pack. I already explained before. So each box can treat 200 single brood box hives. You have a shelf life of 24 months. After opening the aluminum sachet, because the 10 cartridges are included in an aluminum sachet, you should use all the cartridge in 3 months. And after starting a cartridge, so as soon as you start to use one cartridge, you should use it immediately. So the product will be available from April 2026 in Canada. So just some reminder, don't forget, you have to implement the use of all your Varroa toolbox in an IPM strategy. You have to monitor, adapt, and rotate the use of the different treatment at your disposal. Just to give you some example regarding this slide, but we performed a study last year with Auburn University in Canada. So the goal was to compare different treatments, so Apivar 2.0, Amiflex followed by a Thymol product, Amiflex followed by Varroxsan, so you will discover Varroxsan a little bit later, and Varroxsan followed by Amiflex. So just very quickly, you have the alcohol wash, so Varroa per 100 bees at pre-treatment, after 7 days, 21 days, 49, and at the end of the treatment. So as you can see, in all groups, except maybe one, so Varroxsan followed by Amiflex, after 7 days, you have a slight decrease in mite infestation. It continued over day 21. We had to remove 2 colonies from Varroxsan group, the group who start with Varroxsan, because of too many mites. So it was not possible to keep the colony into the apiary. And just to give you all the data, so the kinetic of action, you have the different efficacy after, I will say, the maximum treatment period. So for Apivar, we achieved 95% efficacy. For Apivar 2.0, 97.7. Amiflex followed by Timoflex, 94.1. Amiflex followed by Varroxsan, 98.3. And Varroxsan followed by Amiflex, 97.4. Just very quick conclusion on this trial. It will be published, but the result demonstrate 2 things. So Apivar 2.0 provide an effective Varroa control strategy, and Varroxsan was not consistently effective as a first treatment of the treatment plan, but was more effective when a flash treatment was performed just before. So it's the difference with Amiflex Varroxsan and Varroxsan Amiflex. The curve blue compared to the violet one. So it was more effective quickly when you apply a flash treatment before. And it's very important to have a knockdown effect before your long action treatment, because the colony will grow healthier winter bees, so it will improve the colony survival. So some QR code if you want to know more about the different products, but I will pass quickly. The last product I wanted to present you is Bactobee. So it's a brand new product we will launch in Canada very soon. So what is Bactobee? So Bactobee is a live probiotic for honeybees. It's based on a live Pediococcus acidilactici. So this product will support bee immunity. So this feed will strengthen the digestive and immune system, helping bees taking over with pesticide and environmental stressors. It's natural and high quality, formulated without preservative, without GMO or animal ingredients. Bactobee use only essential natural component. So it will be presented in 250 grams, so for 50 application. One application is 5 grams of the powder on top of the frame, and 2.5 kilograms, so for 500 application. So I put a list of different scientific studies showing the effect of Pediococcus acidilactici for honeybee health. So just in few words, Pediococcus acidilactici and Bactobee will help to restore the gut microbiota stability of the honeybees, to help bees to have a greater resilience to environmental stressors. It will restore survival rate of bees exposed to pesticides, as for example, chametoxam and boscalid. It will also improve winter survival and spring recovery, and optimize colony, of course, performance. So thank you very much for your attention, and feel free to ask any question, and we will answer at the end of the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rémi, for that quality presentation. I see there is some questions rolling into the chat, which we'll save for our session afterwards. So to move along, secondly on today's agenda, we have Paulo Mielgo, and he's from Vita Health, and he's going to talk about Varroxsan. So turning over to you, Paulo.
Thank you so much for the time, for the opportunity. Like Andrew said, my name is Paulo Mielgo. I'm technical director of Vita, and a little bit about my background. I'm a bee vet. I'm from Argentina, for a beekeeper family holding more than 2,000 colonies. Yeah, my work at Vita is I'm in charge of the R&D department, the quality department, and the pharmacovigilance department. So looking at a little bit of many aspects of the company. Going to share my presentation. Can you please let me know if you can see the presentation? Yeah. Okay, so today we are going to present you the development of a new Varroa control using a slow-release oxalic acid strip. But before we start talking about Varroxsan, I would like to take a few minutes to talk about resistance, because as you know, in the last few years, it's been a big losses in different parts of the world. US and Canada are the country with higher losses. So because we are presenting a product based on oxalic acid, and it's always been said that Varroa will not develop resistance to organic product, so it is important to explain a little bit about that, because that is not true. Here on the screen, you will see a very short list of different types of resistance. The first of that is the site of action insensitivity, which is the most common that Varroa has developed many years ago against taufluvalinate, later on to Coumaphos, and the last few years against Amitraz. But like I said, there are other types of resistance that Varroa can develop. For example, microbial assisted resistance, which is when a Varroa might make an association with the bacteria, and that bacteria make a shield or protects the Varroa from the active ingredient. A few years ago in Florida, a researcher found a bacteria on the body of the Varroa, and that bacteria was able to eat the oxalic acid. So I want to be very clear on this. I'm not saying there is resistance to oxalic acid, but if we keep using only oxalic acid as the main active ingredient for control Varroa will develop a resistance to survive. Yeah. So it is very important to understand this. Other type of resistance is the behavioral resistance, which is a change of the behavior of the Varroa mite. A few years ago in Spain, a group of researchers, they found that Varroa was spending around 4 days on top of the bees and going back faster into the cell brood. The bibliography, very old bibliography, said that the average was from 12 to 14 days that Varroa was exposing or on the body of the bees, and that shorter period is a behavior change made that any active ingredient will be much harder to kill the Varroa if the period that is exposed to the active ingredient is shorter. So integrate pest management is very important, and it's very important to understand that we need to use all the tools that we have available for Varroa control. But now I'm presenting Varroxsan. This is how the product looks like. In Canada, we do have 2 presentations. One is in 20 strip pack, and the other is in the 60 strip packs. And here we have a picture of the first version and the second version. The product is the same. The only thing that we have included was the 2 lines in the middle of the strip to show you where the strip must be fold and hang between the frames. And that is, it is very, very important. And also to try to put the strip in frame with brood, because we need Varroxsan to be in contact with the bees all the time to be able to distribute the active ingredient into the colony. So what is Varroxsan? Varroxsan is a slow-release cardboard strip which contains 7 grams of oxalic acid per strip. So a brew box will be 28 grams of oxalic acid. Our recommendation is 1 strip every 2.5 frames of bees, so 4 strips per brew box from 6 to 8 weeks. And after that, we need to remove the strip. Again, even if it's an organic acid, we need to remove the strip to avoid or slow down the potential resistance created by Varroa. Varroxsan is totally safe, even at 1.5 times the dose for bees, brood, queens. And it is manufactured under GMP, which is very, very important because we ensure you that each strip will contain 7 grams of oxalic acid. And as you may know, a few weeks ago, it was approved in Canada, the possibility of make the homemade formulation of oxalic acid. And even if I'm not going to comment a lot about that, it is important to understand that knowing how much oxalic acid we add into the colony is not only important for the safety of the colony, of the bees, but also because you are producing the food. And that is the main point that you need to be concerned about making homemade product with oxalic acid or with other active ingredient. You are food producer. Your children are eating that honey. So that is very important. For Canada, this is very interesting because Varroxsan was approved to be used during the honey flow with a super on. So it is safe for bees, and using the recommended dose, it is safe for the honey that you are producing. And it is allowed to be used in spring, summer, or in fall. That is when the product is registered to be used. So which is the main difference between Varroxsan and the homemade strip or homemade pad? Basically, the unique type of cardboard. This unique cardboard is strong enough that slow down or avoid the remotion by the bees. And that improve the efficacy even with a much lower quantity of oxalic acid. And that is the advantage of this product. With a much lower oxalic acid content, you can achieve better efficacy than homemade oxalic acid product. So far, Varroxsan has been registered in many countries and been tested in many countries, like in Uruguay, Argentina, in the US, in Washington and Michigan, and other parts of the US, in California. And I'm showing Washington because it's the closest that we have to Canada. I know that in Canada is quite big and there is a lot of difference between one part and the other. But regarding Washington, this study was done by the University of Washington for a PhD student, and that was at the end of the summer, in the autumn, and we was tested again an Amiflex registered product, and the efficacy of Varroxsan was, as you can see on the green bar, going down during the 8-week treatment. On the other hand, the Amiflex strip, they were increasing the Varroa load during the treatment. And that is the reason of that was that the resistance to Amiflex. So it is a concern, it is a problem ongoing in US and Canada. You have now new tools, and you need to, as beekeeper, you need to use all the tools that you have in order to reduce the resistant population and be able to use Amiflex as a product in your colonies. The other study that it was done in the US by the Michigan University, it was a test between Varroxsan and the 2 formulation homemade from California. I put in red the quantity of gram of oxalic acid. So Varroxsan was 28 grams per colony. Formulation A was 40 grams of oxalic acid per pad, and the formula B or formula 2 was 25 grams of oxalic acid per colony, and also was the registered formic acid tested in that trial. Just to let you know, the current approved homemade formulation is the one as R2, the R2, which is the 50% oxalic acid, 50% glycerin, which will give you 25 grams of oxalic acid per brew box. So the efficacy in Varroxsan and the group with 40 grams was very good, and the only group that went below 1% was Varroxsan. The 40 gram oxalic acid was good, but remained above 1%. The 25 gram of oxalic acid, the efficacy went negative because it increased during the time, and that is because the bees removed too quickly the pad of the soft cardboard, and you don't have more oxalic acid to kill Varroa mite. And the formic acid, again, the efficacy wasn't very good, but the point here was that we continue counting Varroa for 8 weeks, and the formic acid is a flash treatment. So I think that we need to focus here on Varroxsan versus homemade oxalic acid. And another very interesting point was that a colony treated with Varroxsan started with 14.6% of Varroa, and by day 14, that colony went down to 5.5% of Varroa, and by day 55, the percentage of Varroa was 1.9. So showing that Varroa can reduce even higher Varroa load and continue killing Varroa during the 8-week treatment. Anyway, we do not recommend to start treating when you have 14. It's too late. The colony is too weak. In any case, the colony treated with Varroxsan, that colony in particular, has an increase of 5.5 frame of beat during the treatment period, showing that Varroxsan not only killed the Varroa, but also improved the health of the colony and helped the colony to grow and go bigger into the winter time. Another interesting trial for the US and for Canada was done in 2024, in 2024 in Washington, and that was a summer treatment to see what happened. So during the summer, there were 4 groups: the control group, untreated colony, Varroxsan, the recommended dose, Varroxsan 1.5 times, because we wanted to see any residue in the honey, and formic acid. And as you can see, at the end of the treatment, or during the treatment, there was not much difference between the group, but at the end of the treatment, the researcher decided to cage the queens and make a flash treatment. And at that time, they saw that the untreated colony has a big peak, and the colony treated with formic or with Varroxsan recommended dose, the peak was much lower. And with the 1.5 times, it was much lower, the Varroa peak. So this showed that Varroxsan can be used during the summer and keep the Varroa low, improving your honey production. Also, it was really safe for the bees, for the brood, because the formic acid group has only 40% of emerged new bees, and Varroxsan 67, and the control 87. So Varroxsan was safer than formic in this study. And regarding the residue, it was a little bit increased on the oxalic acid content in the group with 1.5 times the recommended dose. Again, the recommended dose, 4 strips per brood box, does not increase the oxalic acid content in the colony. So the product is safe for bees, for human. But again, now in the US, the homemade recommended dose is 60 grams of oxalic acid, 60, because not even the 40 can achieve good efficacy. And that is a concern because, again, you are honey producer and you are producing a food for the people. This is a very interesting study that we done last year in the US, and it is also interesting for Canada because you are a country that buy a lot of package of bees. And we decided to test Varroxsan in package that were transported from California to Washington. So we apply 1 strip, half a strip, or nothing as an untreated control. And the package traveled 96 hours from, again, California to Washington. And we put a sticky board on the package of bees. And the result was that the package treated with Varroxsan has an average of death mite of 35 mite. The package treated with half a strip, 14 mite. And the untreated package, only 2 mite. Showing a few things. First of all, even if the package were done from already treated colony, the colony where they had a lot of mite still after that treatment, showing that Varroxsan can be used for package to be used during the transport period, and it kills the Varroa and is safe for bees and is safe for the queen. So this is another tool for you as beekeeper when you are buying a package of it. After that, the strip can be removed from the packet and put on the colony to continue the treatment when the package is growing during the time. And the last one that I like to present is a study done by the Institute of Research from Uruguay. This study was requested by the Uruguayan government, and it was, again, during the summer period. And the idea was not only to check efficacy, but safety and residue in honey. So regarding efficacy, as you can see, the red bar at the untreated colony that they increased during the treatment period, and the green bars, the colony treated with Varroxsan, they decrease. Bee population and brood was similar in both groups, showing Varroxsan was safe, and the residue of oxalic acid in honey and in bee wax was similar in both groups, showing that using at the normal or the recommended dose, there is no increase of oxalic acid. So some question or point to discuss very briefly is the application. Again, our recommendation is one strip every 2.5 frames of bees, so four strips per brew box. Apply this. You must to fold the strip and hang between the frame. And if you can put the strip in frame with brew, will be much better because you will know that bees will be there because there is brew, and they will be taking care of the brew and touching the strip and distributing the strip, the active ingredient. And it is allowed in the label that you can remove the strip after a few weeks if the cluster has moved away, and put the strip where the cluster has located. And that it's not only for Varroxsan, it's for any strip treatment. When you move the strip after a few weeks of treatment, you push the bee to be in contact again with the strip and the active ingredient, and there is a better distribution of the active ingredient, improving the efficacy. Again, it should be from 6 to 8 weeks the treatment, and you must to remove the strip after that. So some mistake that we saw last year in US since the product was launched in the US market. First of all, is that the strip were placed on the edge, on the corner of the brew box, which on the picture you see bees near the strip, but at night when the temperature goes down, the cluster make the bee make a cluster, small ball, and the strip remain untouched. So there is no distribution of the active ingredient. The second picture, similar situation. Here, only 2 strips are in contact all the time with the bees. The other 2 are far away. And the most common mistake was that the strips were placed on top of the frame. And that is because normally homemade oxalic acid pad are placed on top of the frame. And we have tested a lot of Varroxsan in that position, and we know that there is no efficacy because it's very limited the time that bees are in contact with the strip, even if there are 2 double brew box. So the strip must be full and placed between the frames. This is very common in Canada because most of you use double brew box, so it can be used in a brew and a half or double brew box. Yes, but we recommend to maximum of 6 strips per brew box because that is enough for achieving great efficacy. And where to place the strip is depending where the brood is. So if most of the brood is in the lower brood chamber, you need to place 4 strips on the lower brood chamber and 2 strips on the top. And if the brood is similarly in both brood boxes, you apply 3 and 3. So that is how you need to distribute the strip, but do not use more than 6. That is enough. So thank you so much. And well, the question will be for at the end of the presentation.
Yes, thank you, Paulo. We'll move along quickly in consideration of time. We've got Adam Pachl, who's from GreenLight Biosciences, and he's going to talk about a product that's fairly new to most of us, Norroa. So thank you, Adam.
Yeah, so like I was introduced, my name is Adam Pachl. I live in North Dakota in the United States, so very similar to at least some of the audience here in Canada. And I'm here to present about Norroa. It's a new approach to Varroa mite control, not yet registered in Canada, but as I will get into, it has been submitted. So that is in the works, and it is registered in the United States. Get my slide advanced. So as I said, it is under review in Canada right now with the PMRA. So because of that, I need to be very clear that I'm not presenting anything as an advertisement. I'm trying to sell anything, trying to advertise everything. Right now, everything that I'm presenting is just for information and for education to be in compliance with PMRA rules and everything like that. So just to make sure that everybody's very clear of that, I'm not trying to advertise, not trying to sell anything right now. Just trying to let you know what's going on, what could be coming in the future, should it be registered, should Norroa get registration in Canada, and some of the data that we have behind it right now. So with that is Norroa. It's a novel mode of action. Oh, a little bit about myself, just who I am since I'm not from Canada. I've been around beekeeping for getting close to a decade now. Have a couple hives of my own, but I was an apiary inspector in North Dakota in the United States. For those that aren't familiar, that's the biggest beekeeping state in the United States, far and away. So I worked with some of the biggest beekeepers, not only in the United States, but in the world, as well as hobbyists. So worked with beekeepers of all shapes and sizes with all sorts of issues, as well as having my own hives with my now 9-year-old son that we keep together, as well as helping our local science museum and zoo with their education hives. So back to Norroa, novel mode of action that utilizes RNA interference, and I'll get into that. It provides long-lasting control that we've observed in field trials conducted over 4 years, getting close to 5 now, probably. It supports bee health, easy to use, and it's environmentally friendly. And also, I'll give the data that we have behind all of that. But because it's based on RNA interference, I'll kind of go over how that works really quickly for everybody, just to make sure everyone understands how that works, because it's a little bit of a new concept for a lot of people, and even people that are familiar with it, a little bit of a refresher. So to understand RNA interference, we'll go back to basics and the central dogma and the hierarchy of information. So everyone remembers that we have DNA, all living organisms have DNA. And it's the recipe book. It's got all of the information for our genetic code. Within our DNA, each section has a gene in it. It codes for specific things usually. There's sections that are repeating, but within each section is a gene. Beyond the DNA, the next step is RNA. There are a lot of different kinds of RNA. In this instance, we are interested in messenger RNA. That messenger RNA does just what its name implies. It carries the message from the DNA. It helps to read the DNA, encode that message or decode that message and carry it to the next step, which is the proteins. The messenger RNA or RNAs in our body help to create proteins, which really is the functional part of our bodies. Proteins are how we and all living organisms function. Without proteins, we wouldn't be able to do the things we do. Our cells and all the parts of our bodies wouldn't be able to function. So that's what's known as the central dogma. That's how, the most basic of terms, we function. With RNA interference, we are using RNA to interfere with part of that process. So what we are doing is introducing a small piece of what is called double-stranded RNA. Many people are familiar with single-stranded RNA, but there is double-stranded, and that it's very specific. Usually it can be various lengths, but with GreenLight Biosciences, RNA interference is kind of what we do. Usually it's a few hundred base pairs, which is pretty short. That gets introduced into the target pest, either through ingestion, through absorption. In the case of Varroa, it's through absorption, and then it gets taken into their cells. There is for lack of a better term, piece of machinery, cellular machinery called dicer, that then breaks that piece of double-stranded RNA into what's called small interfering RNAs. They go from double-stranded to single-stranded, and they're much shorter. They go from a few hundred base pairs to these small interfering RNAs are now roughly 20 base or 20 nucleotides long. So they're very short. 20 is not necessarily the exact length, but around there, it gives you the idea. Those small interfering RNAs are now very specific, and they bind to a messenger RNA or a section of messenger RNA. And because they're so small and they're so specific, they can really only bind to, something that is an exact match. And because this double-stranded RNA that we are using has been designed specifically for a pest, they can only bind to one piece of messenger RNA. In this instance, one specific messenger RNA in a Varroa mite. That is the only thing that it can interact with. Once it binds to that messenger RNA, or mRNA, that mRNA can no longer carry its message. It's bound, it cannot do anything. It just degrades without creating its protein, and that blocks the message. That protein is not created, and therefore its function doesn't happen. It blocks the function, and whatever it was going to do is prevented. In this case, with Norroa, that is reproduction. So Norroa blocks reproduction in the Varroa mite, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But first, we'll talk about how we introduce Norroa, how we apply it to our hives. So the dsRNA, the name of this segment, or the name of the active ingredient, is Vatiscana. So Vatiscana is in Norroa. Norroa is the product name. Is formulated, and it's pre-mixed, pre-measured into a sucrose solution that comes in these pouches. And an application is very simple. It's a dose on the label in the United States, and what has been submitted is 2 pouches per brood box. You just peel a sticker off of the pouches like you see in these photos here. Uh, Peel the stickers back. That exposes perforations that already exist in the pouch under the sticker. Place 2 pouches per brood box down, either on the bottom boards or on top of the hives, and your application is done. The bees will then access the sugar syrup with the active ingredient already in it through those perforations, and they will store it throughout the brood nest, throughout the brood box. At that point, those stores will be used to feed the brood. And when the mites are hiding underneath the larva, specifically the 5th instar larva just before the cell gets capped, during that last feeding, the mites will come in contact with the food that's been pulled from those stores that have Norroa in it. Now, Varroa mites have this really, and a lot of arthropods in general have this really cool, really unique ability to just absorb RNA that they come in contact with. Just as biologists, we're still trying to figure out exactly how that happens, if it's through their exoskeleton, if it's through the paratremes where they breathe. That's kind of one of the questions we're still trying to narrow down, but we know that just through contact, they can absorb this. And because it's targeted at Varroa mites, then they absorb that RNA. If it's environmental RNA, like through the flowers that the nectar was gathered from, usually it has no impact because that's not targeted to them. Because Norroa is, they absorb it, and then that RNA interference process that I described starts. So normally they would reproduce. In this case, the foundress mite will still exist at the bottom of the cell, but she will no longer lay eggs. And when you apply Norroa with low mite populations, which it's designed to do, it will prevent that population growth from ever occurring. It's not a knockdown product. It's not designed to be applied when your mite levels are already high, late in the season. It's designed to be applied early when your mite levels are low, or anytime when your mite levels are low, and it'll prevent that rapid mite growth. So there's been some external research done. The first paper that was published was from University of Victoria, Wellington in New Zealand. It was published in 2024 as part of Rose McGruddy's PhD work. And what she did was she created what they called mini hives. So it was essentially modified nuke. One side of it was for brood rearing, and the other side was for feeding and applying whatever feed they needed to. You can see here the reproductive cycle of the honeybee that we all know overlapped with the reproductive cycle of the Varroa mite. And what they did was they applied different solutions of Vatiscana, or different concentrations, along with some control feeds. And a couple days before cells were capped, they introduced Varroa mites into all the different study groups. Normally, what you would see is Varroa mites lay eggs, the first being a male. We all probably know this, subsequent eggs being female. And what they did was they uncapped cells 12 days after they were capped, expecting to see, in a normal situation, 2 developed female offspring. But what they found was that in hives or mini hives that received Norroa, there generally was no offspring at all. Occasionally maybe an egg that was unable to hatch or something like that. But by and large, there was the reproduction of the foundress mites, if they were exposed to Norroa, was blocked. So what they saw, there were a few different concentrations. There was 2 grams per liter and 8 grams per liter that was tested. There was a 4 gram per liter solution, but there were errors in administering it, so they weren't able to use the data. And then as well as a dsRNA control, so double-stranded RNA that was just not targeted at anything in the Varroa mite, and a sugar syrup control. And what they found was that both concentrations of Vatiscana effectively blocked reproduction in the Varroa mite, whereas both control solutions had no impact, which is what you would expect to see when there's nothing in there that's designed to block the reproduction. I like to point this out because what's interesting is that in the labeled version in the US and what has been submitted to PMRA, 4 grams per liter is actually what is the recommended dose, or what is the dose. So whether it was half of the dose or twice the dose, both were effective. That's also important to know because as we see, whether it was 2 grams per liter or 8 grams per liter compared to both control solutions, there was no impact on the proportion of living pupae within the hive, which makes sense because as I've said, it is genetically targeted at Varroa mites, and there's no overlap with honeybees, meaning that biologically there's just no capability for it to do anything to honeybees. As biologically, as far as your bees are concerned, this is just sugar syrup. So they're going about their feeding, they're going about their normal everyday life in your hive. And as far as they're concerned, this is just sugar syrup. So we have done, as I said earlier, years worth of field studies. I'm mainly going to focus on US data, but we have started doing some in Canada with tech transfer teams. We have done probably dozens, more than dozens of field studies with thousands of colonies. This is data based on one study, one trial in 1 year, but it took place over 5 different states with 5 commercial beekeepers, in total encompassing over 1,200 colonies. So it was a very large trial. It was in Idaho, North Dakota, Maine, Georgia, and Florida. So northern states, southern states, hot and cold. What happened was there were 3 different treatment groups. There was an uncontrolled, a chemical, just traditional chemical treatment, and a Norroa treatment. Treatments were put in a few weeks after splits were made, and then everything was monitored at the given monitoring intervals. Obviously, with the untreated control, no one is surprised. If you don't treat your mites, they get out of hand. I don't think anyone's ever surprised to see that. With the chemical control, it worked just fine until it was removed from the hive. And then immediately after the chemical control was removed, we saw mite growth, mite populations begin to grow. Norroa was applied again, just like everything else, with a few weeks after splits, and then it with one application was able to keep mites below the 3 mite per 100 bee threshold, so 3% threshold, for 18 weeks. It saw an entire calendar season of mite population suppression, and this again was in very different states. The only thing the commercial beekeepers did out of the ordinary was we asked them to not use any other mite treatments. So they were treating these bees, managing them the same way they did any other bees or colonies within their operations. You'll notice it says Norroa spring chemical fall and chemical spring chemical fall. At the 18-week mark, we did put in just a chemical treatment into the 2 groups that had received a treatment. The untreated control did remain untreated, and then we tracked them again for 18 weeks. We didn't necessarily monitor mites because some of these went into like a winter storage, or they were just in a colder state where we weren't able to do mite washes and check what the mite levels were. But we returned 18 weeks later to see which colonies were alive and monitor things like that. Again, not surprising if you don't treat mites for 36 weeks. I'm honestly surprised how many colonies did survive. We had about a 15% survival rate. And I think that's pretty good for not treating commercial colonies for 36 weeks. The chemical treatment group, 36 weeks later, so this would be in about February, had about a 40% survival 40% survival rate. But the Norroa treated group, so the only difference between these two was that spring treatment of Norroa had about a 70% survival rate. In the United States, that's pretty good in a commercial operation. We traditionally see 40 to 50% losses in the last 5 to 6 years. Obviously, I think everyone that's familiar with US beekeeping last year knows it was 60 to 70% this year. It sounds like it's not quite as bad, but it's definitely not good. So there have been really good overwintering results, and that's just it was even mentioned in the previous talk. You keep your mites low, and you're going to have much higher success. I think a lot of beekeepers know that. Lower mites, lower damage to your bees, and less disease circulating throughout your hive. That's just kind of something that a lot of beekeepers know by now. So applying Norroa is very simple and easy to use. Like I said, there's no mixing, no measuring. All you have to do is peel a sticker back and place it in your hive. And there's a couple different ways that we expect it to be on the Canadian label. On the US label, there are some options that are given that make it easy and you can kind of make it fit within your operation. Like I said, no mixing, no measuring. Longer control means fewer trips, fewer treatments. If you don't want to go into your hive as much, you don't need to, and you can focus on other things. In Canada, we expect standard beekeeping equipment, like no need for respirators, goggles, anything like that. On our US label, there's no special equipment required. We basically say whatever you where to keep your bees is what you need for Norroa. Obviously, we can't speak to that for sure until we get our Canadian registration. And then no temperature restrictions. It's stable at pretty much any temperature. Storage, you just keep it at room temperature. There's no need to refrigerate it or anything like that. So whatever temperature you keep your bees, whatever temperature you keep your bees and open your hives, is what you can apply it at. Finally, because this is a pretty international audience, just our registration statuses. So we were registered, or Norroa was registered in the United States in September of 2025. In Canada, we've been conducting field trials. Our submission was made last spring, so Q1 of 2025. In EU, it's a slightly different process, but we have made our submission there, so we're under review in the European Union. We've also submitted in New Zealand and Mexico, so we're under review in all of those geographies. And we're also exploring and kind of preparing to submit in Australia and Great Britain as well. So definitely some different regions that we're looking at and preparing to submit for application while we are under review in these other areas. So with that, I have a slide for questions, but obviously that's waiting till the end. But if there are questions that don't go answered, these are a few places that you can contact us as well as through our website at any time.
Thank you very much, Adam. And thank you for sharing your contact information. I'm sure that the other presenters will be happy to do so. And if that's the case, maybe in the next few minutes, if you could pop that into the chat for people to get in touch with you directly. So now we've come to the question and answer section of our afternoon. I should say afternoon here for me, considering all the time zones we're covering. I know that's not accurate for everyone, but nonetheless. So how this is going to work is we're going to ask people to put information and questions in the chat, and Martin and I will do our best to repeat those questions. So we'll select some questions and repeat for the presenters. We'll again go back a little bit because I see the chat's been fairly busy and try and tease out the questions that have already been asked. But that's the format that we'd like to follow for about the next 15 minutes to give everybody an opportunity to quiz these guys. So I see that everybody's ready, and maybe Rémi and Adam and Paulo, you can just turn your mics on. I think. And we can throw the questions at you. So if you're looking for the chat function, just scroll to the bottom, take your funny little cartoon hand that you've got there and turn it into a cursor, drag that to the bottom, and you'll see where it says chat if you haven't found that already. And you can actually place the chat in it'll come up as a column on your right hand side there. So put your questions in there, and Martine and I will do our best. So yes, absolutely great presentations, and thank you. So as we're getting started, maybe what I could ask just briefly, and thank you very much, Adam, for just going through when our expectation is for that product. We'll look forward to that being made available in Canada, and maybe particularly for Rémi and Paulo. Just review again for us when we can expect that to be your new products to be available in Canada. And I know it's not a fair question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Have you got an idea of price? And maybe you can mention again, because there was a couple of questions in the chat about the packaging and what's going to be available for different size beekeeping operations. So that's three things I've asked right off the bat. Your expectation is for availability across Canada, what the package is going to look like for different operations, and if you've got any idea about price, and I know that might not be in your wheelhouse as the science guys, but we got to ask. And I think I'll turn it over to Martine, maybe if she can summarize that for our Francophone audience. You're muted, Martine.
J'avais oublié de mettre ton micro. Donc, merci Andrew. Merci à nos trois présentateurs aussi pour leur présentation. Donc, les premières questions qu'on veut leur poser, c'est quand les différents produits seront sur le marché et puis de nous donner un peu une idée du prix de vente au Canada. Peut-être qu'on peut commencer par Rémi, so we can start with Rémi.
Yes. So I will try to answer this question. So for three products, Apivar 2.0, Amiflex, and Bactobee, so these three products will be available, I will say mainly end of April in Canada, and they will be available at Made or Dancing Bee, that are our main distributor in Canada. And just regarding price, and you said the good thing, Andrew, it's not science. So we will let the distributor manage this question. Sorry.
Is that literally passing the buck, Rémi?
Sorry?
Is that literally passing the buck? Yeah, thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Donc, pour la réponse de Rémi, donc les trois produits Apivar 2.0, Amiflex et Bactobee vont être disponibles en avril de cette année. Puis pour les prix, il va falloir aller voir vos distributeurs de produits apicoles au Canada. Donc, Rémi a dit chez Dancing Bee et Bee Made principalement. Au Québec, probablement qu'ils vont être disponibles aussi là, chez d'autres distributeurs. So then, Paulo, what about you? What about Varroxsan?
Varroxsan is already in Canada. As far as I know, it's being shipped to the distributor as we speak. So it will be on the market by the end of this week or early next week. About prices, I don't know exactly the price for the beekeepers. I guess it will be on the websites of the different beekeeper retailers very soon. But to be honest, I don't know the price, which I know is the price already sold out. So full container is sold out. The second container will be on the sea soon. So if they want, they need to contact local retailer to make the order because that is there is no more product in our warehouse in Canada.
Thank you, Paulo. So, pour le Varroxsan, le produit va arriver au Canada sous peu, donc il est sur la mer présentement. Même chose pour les prix, là, contactez vos distributeurs locaux pour avoir le prix. And then for you, Adam.
Yeah, so like I said, right now it's not available in Canada. So in the US at the moment, it ranges depending on pack sizes between $17 and $22 per brood box. It's brand new, so now it's been available for less than 6 months in the US. So now our main focus is bringing the price down. So by the time it gets to Canada, it's very hard to predict what the price will be because we're actively trying to make it more affordable. Um, so I really can't even try to predict what it will cost by the time it's available in Canada. Less than that, hopefully.
Merci. Donc, Norroa n'est pas encore disponible présentement au Canada, étant donné qu'il n'est pas homologué. Mais aux États-Unis, le prix pour une hausse à couvert est autour de 17 à 22 dollars américains. Mais ils essaient là, d'essayer de diminuer le prix là, lorsqu'il sera disponible au Canada.
Okay. Thank you, everyone. I'm just looking through here, and there's some questions in the Q&A section on the software as well, which we'll try to get through. One of the ones, and MedHat was first in there, I think, with a question very early on, talking about how do we dispose of these products after we remove the leftover strips, or Adam, maybe in your case, I guess it's a plastic container that the product had been in. So maybe if you guys want to give us a little bit of help on how we can dispose of those after they're finished.
Yeah, I can go first. The pouches, at least in the US, you can just throw them away unless there's some local regulation that requires something different. But yeah, you're right. They're just a plastic pouch that you can throw away. Again, I'll throw in the disclaimer. I don't know if there will be something different in Canada that gets put in, but I don't expect anything at this time. So.
Thank you. Regarding Apivar 2.0 and Amiflex, I think you should contact the local representative just to be sure how to manage the strips and everything, just to be clear with local legislation. So.
I was reading the label because each country is different, so just to be sure and be very clear. But yeah, every provincial has their own requirements, so you need to check your provincial guidelines to put the use product. So every provincial has their own guidelines, so you need to follow what the authority said. There is no a guideline from us. So that is what the PMRA requests to us.
Donc, la question était comment on dispose, donc comment on jette le produit une fois qu'il a été utilisé. Et les réponses, en fait, sur les étiquettes officielles de l'ARLA, c'est indiqué comment les jeter. Mais chaque province a aussi son mode de disposition. Donc, il faut vraiment aller contacter les autorités locales à chaque province pour savoir comment jeter les produits une fois qu'ils ont été utilisés.
Okay. Adam, I see there's a question here about Norroa, and it actually is something that I was thinking as you were speaking. And I'm going to ask you two questions at once about your product because they're related in a sense. What about using it with honey supers on? And what about using the product while you're feeding sugar syrup?
Yes, those are both really good questions. So in the United States, at least, there and in the US or the United States and the EU, even though our registration's not done in the EU, we have received a tolerance exemption for Norroa being in the honey. That being said, because of the way it's delivered to the mites, because it needs to be incorporated into the food that's fed to the larva, you don't want to apply the pouches with supers on. Otherwise, you risk that being moved up into the supers and not being used for that food, just being stored, and then it will reduce the efficacy. So you want to apply the pouches without supers on just to maximize your efficacy. But we do see the pouches generally emptied and the syrup stored away in 2 to 3 days. It's a small amount. Two pouches together is 1 liter of syrup. So it's a small amount of syrup. And then once those pouches are empty, then you can put your supers on. and go about your normal beekeeping business. We do recommend that you not feed additional syrup while you have the pouches on. So, stop, make sure your feeders are empty for a few days before you apply your pouches. Wait till they're empty and then give a few days after that before you give additional syrup, just to allow them to really evenly distribute it throughout the brood boxes. Get as even distribution, because if they distribute them throughout the frames and you get nice even distribution, that means that the workers or the nurse bees, as they're feeding the larva, will pull from that more evenly, and you'll get more consistent application, as they're, for lack of a better term, self-dosing themselves or self-dosing the hive. You'll see them using it more consistently as they have those stores throughout the colony.
Thank you. So, donc, la question était avec le Norroa, est-ce qu'on peut l'utiliser en même temps qu'il y a des hausses à miel sur la ruche ou en même temps que le nourrissement? La réponse de Adam, c'est que idéalement, on l'applique quand il n'y a pas de hausse à miel et pas de nourrissement pour que les abeilles puissent vraiment l'utiliser et que la solution soit plus efficace. Donc, une fois que les abeilles ont consommé les 2 poches là, qui contiennent environ 1 litre, par la suite, on peut mettre les nourrisseurs ou on peut remettre des hausses à miel.
I see there's quite a few questions kind of on a theme here, and I'm going to ask this, I guess, to Rémi. Others can comment as well. Amitraz resistance, new products. What's the situation? What's the expectation? Is there anything you want to comment on in terms of how these new products fit into our overall concerns of the mites becoming resistant to that chemical, the
Yep.
Acaricide?
So I will try to answer quickly this question. It's not so easy, and we do not have 20 I will say 3 hours to answer, because Amitraz resistance is a difficult topic. So just remind, because I saw some question, it's not Apivar or Apivar 2.0 resistance. It's related to Amitraz resistance. In this case, Paulo spoke also regarding possible oxalic acid resistance. We have flumetrin resistance. So it's I will say, normal development in all, I will say, pest management. So just Apivar 2.0 and Amiflex are just 2 new tools for beekeepers. As we spoke, I think all together, Adam, Paulo, and me, beekeepers has to be careful regarding what they are doing and when they are treating, in which way they are performing their treatment. So the IPM, it's not just a concept, it's something mandatory to keep active ingredient alive, I will say. So it's not because you will use Apivar 2.0 or Amiflex in our case that you will increase Amitraz resistance. You have to rotate. So as soon as you use one active ingredient, the next treatment should be another active ingredient, just to try to kill the potential, I will say, resistance mite that can survive. So of course, if you have a very huge, I will say, resistance level in one colony, you should avoid using this active ingredient. But I saw some question in the chat. Is there any reversal period of Amitraz resistance? Yes, for sure there is a reversal period. But for now, we do not have the real or the clear understanding of the mechanism of Amitraz resistance. So if we do not know exactly the mechanism of resistance, it's very difficult to have an idea of the reversal period. I know there is some works from Frank Rinkiewicz and others. Looks like the reversal period should be less than 1 year. So again, it's feasible to manage resistance, and beekeepers has to use all the tool they have in hand to avoid the resistance to spread and to develop. But Apivar 2.0 and Amiflex, with a good use, respecting the label, again, it would be the same for oxalic acid strip, respect the label, it will avoid the resistance development if used in an integrated pest management. I try to be quick. Not sure it's quick, but
Je vais essayer de traduire aussi en même temps. Donc, la question était avec des produits comme Apivore 2.0, Amiflex, qui ont tous les deux l'amitrase comme ingrédient actif. Comment on gère la résistance, comment on s'attend à à ce que ça évolue. Alors, ce que Rémi nous dit, c'est que comme des produits comme ça, le développement de la résistance est quelque chose qui va venir normalement dans le temps à force de les utiliser. Donc, c'est important de bien les utiliser, de suivre les étiquettes. Ces deux produits-là sont deux nouveaux outils qui peuvent être utilisés dans la boîte à outils là, de l'apiculteur en combinaison avec les autres produits et aussi avec les autres composantes de la lutte intégrée. Donc, c'est vraiment important de suivre la lutte intégrée pour garder ces ingrédients-là possibles d'utilisation là, dans nos conditions. Donc, c'est important de faire une rotation des ingrédients actifs. Donc, étant donné que Apivore 2.0 et Amiflex, c'est le même ingrédient actif, donc il faut faire une rotation avec d'autres produits aussi. Rémi aussi a mentionné le reversal period, donc la période où la résistance peut être diminuée, finalement revenir
état
à
normal.
zéro.
Mm.
Donc, étant donné qu'on ne connaît pas encore bien les mécanismes de résistance là, en lien avec l'amitrase, donc c'est difficile de vraiment statuer sur une période euh,
Réversion.
de réversion. Merci pour l'amitrase. Donc, c'est important de vraiment bien respecter ce qu'on lit sur les étiquettes, puis d'appliquer les principes de lutte intégrée.
Thank you very much for that. And I do appreciate, Remy, that's a complicated question to summarize in a few minutes. But what I found is our time this afternoon has gone by tremendously quickly. And as we're coming to the end, just in conclusion, perhaps I'll just go back ever so briefly to our presenters and say, Paulo, is there anything else that you'd like to share with us that perhaps we need to know that you haven't told us or we haven't asked about when it comes to Varroxsan?
It's a good question. I mean, I was not expecting that. No, like I said, I mean, this is a new tool. So far, we know that a lot of beekeepers are waiting for the product. Again, I'm not going to comment about the homemade approval formulation, but it is very important to remark on that you are producing food, and it is very dangerous when you mix oxalic acid and glycerin and you heat that in the house or in the warehouse. It is very dangerous. So you must, as a beekeeper, be very worried about doing this at home. And again, because you are producing food, you need to be very careful of what you are preparing and think about the potential risk for the humans. Yeah. So that is it is a very important point, not only for oxalic acid, because very short, honey has oxalic acid naturally, coming from the flowers. That is true, and that is fine. What we are adding to the colony is formic acid, thymol, oxalic acid, amitraz are chemical, not natural from the flowers. So it's not the same. So we need to be very careful, and we spend a lot of time and money to study, develop a product to be sure the product will be effective and we safe for the beekeepers, the bees, and the consumer. So that is very important.
Thank you.
Oui, donc pour un mot de la fin, Paulo, nous rappeler que la formulation maison de l'acide oxalique avec la glycérine, donc qui a été récemment homologuée. Donc, il faut se rappeler que c'est des produits qui sont des produits chimiques, en fait, donc des produits qui peuvent avoir une influence sur la santé, donc de faire vraiment attention. euh, Quand on fait la formulation à la maison, puis des outils qu'on va utiliser pour faire les mélanges. Donc, en ayant un produit comme le Varroxsan qui est fait en usine, donc on est sûr d'avoir les bonnes doses toujours, puis c'est beaucoup plus facile à manipuler. Il rappelle aussi que naturellement, là, le miel peut avoir de l'acide oxalique parce qu'il provient des fleurs, mais les produits qu'on utilise à la ruche pour traiter le varroa, donc sont des produits chimiques qui sont utilisés en surplus là, dans les ruches. Donc, c'est pas nécessairement la même chose que l'acide oxalique qu'on retrouve dans les fleurs. Donc, il recommande d'utiliser des produits qui sont formulés en usine.
Okay. And although we are a little bit over time for the sake of fairness, and I really hate to stop anything when like this when such excellent information is being shared. Adam, I'm going to come to you just quickly. Same question. Is there anything else we need to know that we haven't shared already this afternoon about Norroa?
I just emphasize that, when Norroa is available, it's a very different approach, from what we're used to as beekeepers. And so it kind of it makes you think about Varroa management a little different. As a company, we'll never claim that it's a miracle, that it's a silver bullet, but it'll be a very powerful tool to mix in with these other products that we've talked about. A great thing to incorporate into your IPM strategies. And I think together, if it's something that you do want to use, a really good way to help keep Varroa mites under control, and a really good way to help promote healthy colonies.
Thank you.
Donc, le mot de la fin de la part de Adam pour le Norroa. Euh, donc, quand cette approche va être disponible sur le marché, il constate que c'est vraiment une approche qui est très, très différente des produits qu'on a de disponibles présentement. Donc, selon lui, c'est un outil vraiment puissant à ajouter à notre coffre à outils, à notre de lutte intégrée et des produits déjà en place. Donc, qui va vraiment permettre de garder le varroa sous contrôle dans les colonies.
And finally, Remy, in the most unfair position with the least amount of time and the most products to talk about, is there anything finally you'd like to share with us this afternoon?
I will say I just want to thank you all for the different presentation, for taking care of this webinar, and for the chance we have to present these 3 different products. So again, and I think I already say it, but think about new product in your specific strategy. We cannot have all the answer. Okay, should I use this one or this one or this one? You should think, I will say, you should follow also advice from your technical department and everything just to share, okay, what I want to do. Okay, this is the possibility you have with all the toolbox in your hands. And again, I will not repeat too many, but IPM, rotation, check, and manage your colony in a very safe way in order to keep all the tools, I would say, available in the Varroa mite fight, I will say. We will try to develop new products, again, to adapt some, because I saw some question regarding Amiflex and how the product works and everything. Feel free to ask. We have a generic address if you want to ask any question, and we will try to answer, because it's just not feasible in 1 hour or 20 minutes. But thank you.
Merci Rémi. Donc, Rémi a commencé en remerciant là, les organisateurs puis les autres présentateurs aussi d'avoir présenté là, tous ces nouveaux outils-là pour lutter contre le varroa. Donc, il rappelle qu'il n'y a pas de, tu sais, de stratégie unique pour lutter contre le varroa. C'est important d'utiliser une approche combinée, d'utiliser tous les outils qu'on a dans notre boîte à outils, puis surtout de mettre la lutte intégrée au premier plan, puis de faire des bonnes rotations des ingrédients actifs pour éviter la résistance. Puis ils vont aussi de leur côté là, essayer, continuer le développement de nouveaux produits pour améliorer la lutte contre le varroa au Canada.
All right. And again, just to conclude, I'd really like to thank everyone for joining us this afternoon. This has been a great event. I know we could spend a great deal more time going through all the questions, and I apologize for some of the ones that we haven't gotten to. But the questions I think we did have answered, and the information presented to us was so tremendously helpful. So I'd like to send out a virtual round of applause for our presenters this afternoon. I would also like to thank the Canadian Honey Council for supporting this event and helping us to get it organized. The Canadian Bee Tech transfer teams, another great example of the work that we do in Canada, in our provinces, in our regions to help beekeepers. Vita Pharma, thank you very much for your sponsorship and all the help in doing the administration and organization, and even down to getting us online here today so we could participate in this. As we conclude, what I would encourage people to do is please attend the sister session, the subsequent session that's going to happen a week from today, next Wednesday. It's along the same theme, but the topic is weather forecasting and beekeeping management adaptations with Manuel Hempel is going to be one of the topics. Tropolapse response with Canadian Action Plan and your role as beekeepers is going to be presented by Jeff Wilson. There'll be another opportunity for great questions like we've had today. So just like to again thank everyone. Best to all in the upcoming beekeeping season. I won't say goodbye because Medhat's pointing his finger at me, which usually means he wants to say something. So I will say thanks to everybody. And Medhat, and am I assuming right that you wanted to just come in for a second? You're muted, by the way.
Thank you again, and thanks for people who attended this webinar. And a recording will be available. And for those guys who registered, they're going to get an email of a link for the recording of these presentations. That's a question came out here. And we look forward to see you next week. We have two excellent presentations. And if you have any question, you can just write to Véto Pharma and in their website. And we are going to send out a questionnaire to evaluate the webinar itself and tell us what kind of subjects we should use or we should consider for our future webinars. Thanks again.
Okay. And before we go, obviously, if Martine, you could close the and summarize for our Francophone participants. And I must say that everything I say and you repeat in French sounds so much better. So thank you for your help today with that.
Merci, Andrew. Donc, merci à tous les participants. Merci aux présentateurs qui ont partagé leurs connaissances, leurs nouveaux produits aujourd'hui. Merci aussi au Conseil canadien du miel et aux équipes de transfert technologique du Canada qui ont permis la réalisation de ce webinaire. Merci aussi à Véto Pharma pour le financement et l'organisation. Donc, on vous rappelle qu'on a une autre session de webinaire la semaine prochaine, mercredi le 25 mars, donc à la même heure en fonction d'où vous êtes dans le monde. Donc, on a une session qui est un peu différente avec une adaptation de la gestion apicole en fonction du climat, donc des changements climatiques avec Manuel Hempel et le plan d'action en réponse à la venue possible de Tropolapse au Canada avec Jeff Wilson. Donc, on vous rappelle que ce webinaire est enregistré et sera disponible, donc surveillez vos courriels pour avoir le lien pour l'enregistrement. Et pour finir, il va y avoir aussi un sondage d'appréciation qui va vous être envoyé par courriel. Donc, s'il vous plaît, répondez et donnez aussi vos idées pour des idées de sujets pour les prochains webinaires qui seront présentés. Donc, je vous souhaite une bonne fin de journée, puis on se revoit la semaine prochaine pour une autre édition de la série de webinaires.